Rhondalee was born in the beautiful islands of Turks and Caicos. She obtained a Bachelor's of Science degree in government with an emphasis on law. She has a Bachelor's of Law degree, and she has a Certificate of Legal Education as well. Rhonda was admitted to the bar of the Turks and Caicos Islands in 2000 after a period of training as Crown Counsel, designate in the Attorneys General Chambers. She was then appointed Crown Counsel and will go on to become Senior Crown Counsel Commercial Civil in 2005 and Principal Crown Counsel Commercial Civil in 2006, heading the Commercial Civil Division in the Attorney General's Chambers. On the 1st of April 2008, she proudly became the first Turks and Caicos Islander to be appointed Deputy Attorney General of the island. In 2013, Rhondalee was awarded an OBE, Officer of the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in recognition of her services to the development and reform of the public service of the Turks and Caicos Islands. In February 2014, she was appointed the first Turks and Caicos Islanders' youngest person and first woman to be the Attorney General of the Turks and Caicos Islands. On March 15, 2019, Rhondalee became the first female attorney to be admitted to the inner bar of the Turks and Caicos Islands as Her Majesty's Counsel. Rhondalee recently chaired the 2019 Constitution Review Committee. She is also a wife and mother. Let's welcome Honorable Rhondalee Braithwaite Knowles to Pathways to Success.
Welcome to Pathways to Success. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Hunter, and we have, oh my God, the most prestigious, the Honorable Rhondalee Knowles. Is it O-K or O-B-K-E? And Casey, I don't know what that means, but she...
O-B-E-K-C, yes.
Okay, she tell me what... I'm going to ask you, she's the Attorney General over the beautiful island of the Turks Island. And so it's such a great, we're going to have a great interview tonight on the program. What does OBEKC means? Can you make that clear for us?
Sure, Dr. Hunter, it's very wonderful to be with you on this beautiful Sunday evening in the Turks and Caicos Islands. OBE is Order of the British Empire. So it is an award that I received from the Queen, Her Majesty the Queen, before my service in government, in assisting the islands to move through a particularly very difficult time, and helping to grow and develop the public sector in some key areas. And KC stands for King's Counsel. Of course, I received it when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was alive. And it's an honor that is bestowed as a member of the legal fraternity. It's a recognition from the Chief Justice and from the senior members of the bar for the work that is done during your legal career.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
is a great achievement. I mean, even from the Queen giving you that is something to really... That's a great legacy.
Yes,
Can you tell us something now, Your Honorable? Can you tell us about your journey becoming an attorney and reaching such a prestigious position in your legal field?
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm just an ordinary girl from Grand Turk in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And, my upbringing was very normal. I had parents, Pastor Frederick Braithwaite now, and Susan Fulford Braithwaite, who were very strict. They were very strict as we were growing up. They demanded a lot of us in terms of our academic career and our deportment and, sense of responsibility and so on. They led by example. My father was a police officer while we were growing up, and then later on, became a Christian and, became a lay pastor, a lay preacher, and is now in full-time ministry. And my mother always worked as a civil servant, and she was the registrar of lands. and so very very responsible people, very humble, but they demanded a lot of us in terms of what they sent us to school to do. And so it was always we always knew that we were expected to do well academically, and so we did, because they instilled a lot of confidence in myself and my siblings. And I've just always wanted to be an attorney. Or it just that's the only thing I've ever wanted to be. And even in primary school and in high school and so on, it was something that, you know, um, that I always wanted to do. And so it was always my aspiration. I knew of other attorneys, working in the Turks and Caicos Islands, Ariel Missick, who's now Ariel Missick KC, and others who I thought were upstanding members of the community and had a lot of responsibility and respect in the community, did important work for the community. And so it was something that I always wanted to do. And so I grew up in Grand Turk, and did my best through the what was then called the North School. Primary school is now called Ona Glinton Primary School, and then went on to the Grand Turk Christian Academy, and then into high school at what was then called the Turks and Caicos High, and is now called the Helena Jones Robinson High School. And so, I have to say that I owe everything in terms of my education at that level to the school system here in the Turks and Caicos Islands and in Grand Turk in particular. And we had very good teachers. The teachers were from Turks and Caicos, were from Jamaica, from Barbados, from Guyana, and a lot of confident people who never let us think that we couldn't achieve things. They were incredibly strict. There was a lot of rods and belts around in those days that are not things that to talk about now, they would be sort of considered abuse, but certainly it kept us on the straight and narrow, and on what it is that we do. So I have to say that I've always wanted to be an attorney. And then after high school, I went on to study in the United States. I did a first degree in history and government there, and then on to Cave Hill University of the West Indies in Barbados. And that's where I got my Bachelor of Laws degree, and then went on to Eugene Depuche Law School in Nassau. And I did the Certificate of Legal Education there. And I always felt a sense of pride in being from little tiny Turks and Caicos Islands, but being able to achieve, the top marks in law school and in university, where I studied in Virginia. I always felt it was a sort of a sense of pride. Like I had to make Turks and Caicos proud by the opportunities that I had, and to try and just do my best. And so I was really blessed as well by God. A lot of blessings, a lot of beautiful, lovely people in my way, encouraging me, and just my parents were always like cheerleaders, just continuing to encourage me and to remind me of who I was. My mother used to call me every now and again to say, "Don't forget who you are." And I reflect. I thought then it was just, I don't know why this lady was calling me to tell me these things, but as I reflect on it, I realized that she was building a sense of identity and a sense of confidence in me that was necessary to combat, all the things that I would combat in the outside world.
Oh, um, and you mentioned earlier on in speaking that your father was a police officer, and
Yes.
then he went on to become a pastor.
Yep.
Um, was he and your mother was a civil servant? Were those the two that really led you down that path to say, okay, my father was a police officer, he upheld the law, so maybe I should pursue career in law, or particularly in public service?
Well, yeah, probably I am, and that's an insightful question, Dr. Hunter, because it's the first time that I'm really even thinking about it that way. But you're probably correct, because my legal career has been in the public service. And I've been in the public service now for 23 years. And it's been a very fulfilling career. But my mother was very dedicated. She was a very dedicated public officer, and was a part of the group that pushed for rights and for the public, for public servants. Very vocal in her service, very committed in her service. And then my father, as a police officer at that time, there were police prosecutors. And so he would actually go to court and prosecute, even though he was a police officer and not an attorney. So you may well be insightful, Dr. Hunter, giving me a little bit of insight into myself this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Your Honorable Attorney General. As the first Turks and Caicos, being appointed as the first, you're the first female, right?
That's correct.
Female, Attorney General,
That's
right?
correct.
What were some of the challenges you faced in this role, and how did you overcome them?
Well, it was a privilege, to have been appointed because, from the very beginning, as I said, from the very beginning of my legal career, it was my ultimate goal in terms of, my legal career as an attorney, practicing attorney. I wanted to be the attorney general. And the only persons that we saw as Turks and Caicos Islanders as attorneys general were white men who were not from Turks and Caicos Islands. And so I think in that time that I was working in the chambers, it was only one black man, but certainly they were all men. And I never saw that as a barrier, I have to say. But along the way, what I did realize is that some men react to other men, in a more they react better to other men than they do to women. They don't generally, it's not all men are like that, but some men have
Yes.
that preference. And so to have a woman come and tell them, what they need to do, or to give them legal advice, and sometimes catch them in a vulnerable moment, right? The lawyer is there in a very vulnerable moment at times to try and help you to get through it, the best result. But so sometimes I felt that those men weren't looking at me as if I was on par with them, or that I was capable of giving that kind of advice. And so as a result of that, I had to be, very persistent, very diligent in the work that I was doing to ensure that it was seen as credible advice that I was giving based on authorities, and that I was very professional, and always tried to be very, very, very professional about the work that I did, so that persons could take me seriously and could understand that, I was competent to give advice. I'll tell you a story. There was one particular attorney general who was very helpful to me, David Jeremiah. I always talk about him because he really stood out as someone who groomed me, who took a great interest in my legal career, and took active steps to help to promote my experience and widen and broaden my experience. And so there was a young man who joined the chambers, in the Attorney General's chambers at one point, and he was quite ambitious and hardworking. And the Attorney General came to me one day and he said, I'm very concerned about this young man, because he said his desire is to become the Attorney General. So he asked him, he said, well, there are some other people in here, who have that goal as well, and they've been here before you. And don't you think, you have competition from them? And he said, the young man told him, no, he didn't think he had any competition because they were all women. And so that, I think, was the death knell of that young man's career, because the Attorney General wasn't very impressed. But it just goes to show you how some persons think that even though, I was here and others were here working very hard in the chambers for years before that person came, he didn't think that there was any competition from women. And then another story I'll tell you, when I at one point was giving some advice as I joined the public service, and I joined the public service in 2000, in the year 2000. So that's like, it was 23 years ago, but it still was in the 2000s. And so, but in the public service handbook, which was not, it was called the general orders at that time, there was a provision that made it clear that a woman, a public officer who was a woman who got pregnant, could continue to work. Right now, if you think about that, and that it sort of shocked me when I found it for the first time, because I was thinking to you understand me, when I was thinking to myself, why would there be a question as to whether or not she could continue to work? But clearly, there needed to be a provision. Someone needed to write that down so that someone else could know that women who got pregnant could continue to work. And so, if that's any clue to you of how the times have changed, and even in the time that I've been in the chambers, happily, yes, there were these kinds of challenges. People in Turks and Caicos like to say, especially the men, that there isn't a problem with women in the TCI because we have a lot of women in senior positions. But I always say, it's news. It's still newsworthy that I'm the first female attorney general, and it's 2023. I mean, I think when we get to the fourth or the fifth or the sixth, then it's not newsworthy anymore, right? And then we don't have a problem. But in many of these areas, we're still the first one, and in different areas. So we have to keep striving.
I must congratulate you on that. The first female attorney general. What happened is that many times, because it's in years gone by, people thought it was only a male dominated position. So that's where that gentleman really missed it, because women are able to, as a matter of fact, in the United States of America, women are the one that runs the biggest corporations right now. They're the most powerful. They're the most powerful right now in many corporations and organizations. We have a female vice president right now.
Yes.
So for any male to think like that, he's short-sighted, very short-sighted. Unfortunate for him, but look at you today. I'm sure he has to.
There you go.
Oh,
Well, I have had one or two occasions when I've had to rescue that same gentleman.
you. Look at that. You have to be his savior. I hope he's watching the interview, because I'm sure he must be writing letters of apologies and recognize. Maybe it'll be something else to interview him.
No hard feelings. No hard feelings. We're friends. We're very friendly.
But tell me something. How did it feel to be recognized with an OBE by Queen Elizabeth II for your contribution to the development and reform of the public service of the Turks and Caicos Islands?
It was such an honor, and especially now as I realize, I think we took her for granted because she was around so long. She was an institution literally and figuratively, and so we just took her for granted. But I was recognized in a way that came as a surprise to me, because we were at a time, in the TCI, where we were dealing with so many very serious issues, and it seems like they were coming all at once. They didn't line up in a neat, orderly line, and so we were all in it together, really sort of pushing, and lots of late nights, lots of long days, lots of working on the weekend and pushing, toward reforms. And during that time as well, the UK had given the TCI a set of milestones to be achieved in order to restore the full internal self-government under the Constitution. So there was a lot at stake. And so as one of the key persons in the government, the Attorney General's chambers really sits at the heart of government, because the work that we do touches everything. Every bit of government needs legal support. And so most of the things that we were doing during that time was providing advice and working to sort of reform key areas, to create legislation and policies and so on. And And it was fairly hard work, and it was also sort of thankless work, because everyone, in the islands were so unhappy about things that had happened, and where we were, and especially our reputation. And I think there have always been, at the core of the public service in the TCI, a core of very dedicated, diligent, hardworking, honest, earnest people, and they haven't always been recognized for that. It's sometimes been the case that, these persons, these hardworking, diligent people, get, painted with a certain brush that sort of sweeps over everybody, which is very unfair to them. And their work is also not always seen. And so that was the sort of, to set the stage, that was the time that we were in. And, as Turks and Caicos Islanders as well, when there was this sort of flood of British, civil servants that came into the islands to lead a number of these areas of reform. And some of those people were very nice persons, and some, again, were not very nice. I mean, they came and they thought all of us were just corrupt, and were over promoted and incompetent and so on. And some of them really didn't, shy away from letting us know that that's what they thought. So in the environment that you're in, you have the Turks and Caicos Islands people very disgruntled because they're not happy about, where the country is. You have these persons that have come in from the outside on the basis that they've come to help, but then, they're looking at you sideways. They're not always working well with you. And so it really felt a little bit like you were in a pressure cooker at times, you know. But I think what we did was just sort of keep our heads down and just kept pressing forward, to, not lose sight of the goal that we were trying to achieve, and that is to help the islands meet those milestones. And we had to meet the milestones by a particular timeline, so that the country could, get, righted, get back on a good democratic footing. And so that is the period that, I was recognized for, but I wasn't expecting recognition. I was just trying to help, and do my part in the public service. And so the day I got a call from the then governor, Rick Todd, and he called me and he said, Rhondalee, I just want you to know that I've been asked to make, nominations for Queen's honors, and I've nominated you, and it's been agreed, and you'll be awarded this OBE for this work. And it really sort of came out of left field. And I'll tell you the truth, I cried, because I was so shocked. I didn't expect it. I wasn't pushing for it. It just happened, and I was so stunned. It caught me off guard, but I thanked him for the recognition. And then the other thing is, when you get these recognitions, you can have the award bestowed on you here in the islands, or you can travel to Buckingham Palace for it to be, or any of the palaces for it to be bestowed on you. So I opted, to be, to Buckingham Palace, and they said to me, "Oh well, it's unlikely that it'll be the Queen because she's very busy, and it's likely to be, some other members of the family." But when I went into Buckingham Palace that day, with my husband and my 3-year-old son and my aunt, who lives in the UK, I was so overwhelmed by the fact that it was in fact, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II who pinned the award, on my lapel. And it was very, humbling. It was very overwhelming. It was a sense of, it was a sort of positive moment, because sometimes, as I said, in the public service, persons just slog along, and they not recognize the work that they're doing, but they're not even looking for it. And then when it comes, where people sort of actually saw the work that you were doing and thought had value and it should be recognized, it was just so, it was a very positive, warm feeling, a feeling of gratitude. That's how I really, took it, and I'll never forget that feeling. And it's not just because it was, Her Majesty the Queen, or it was with the British government. It even, I think, the same about the awards that come from the Turks and Caicos Islands, because it is your service to these islands that is being recognized. And because anyone who's patriotic like me, and who really has a sort of really deep love for the Turks and Caicos Islands, to have your efforts recognized in that way is really rewarding. It's the most rewarding, I have to say.
Wow. Congratulations again. We're going to take a short break. We're speaking to the first female Attorney General of the Turks and Caicos Islands. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with her.
Did you pick out this detergent all by yourself? So cute.
It's half the size and it's half the plastic. And there's nothing cute about unnecessary plastic. Christy, the average person generates over 200 pounds of plastic a year. And there are 329 million of us in the U.S. alone.
Do you want paper or... paper? Yeah.
7th generation Easy Dose laundry detergent. Half the size, half the plastic, all the clean.
So where were we?
The playoff.
Oh, yes. Only a handful of teams remained, hailing from kingdoms far and wide across the college football land, all vying for a spot in the playoffs. Each team led by a great coach, fearless players, and defended by the loyalist of fans. Soon, they would take part in an epic playoff battle for the right to call themselves national champions. And to the victor go the spoils, a beautiful trophy, a grand celebration, and bragging rights that stand the test of time.
And then what happened?
We'll find out soon.
Ready? All clear. Pilot 7 is control. Come on out.
This ship is now under the command of the First Order.
Live your Star Wars story in a new 2-night adventure.
You know what I've come for.
Only at Walt Disney World Resort.
The recap of the Pathway to Success on the road at the Florida Jerk Festival. Like, share, and subscribe to all our social media platforms to watch the full interviews of the artists.
Welcome back to Pathway to Success. I'm right here with the honorable, the first female attorney general of the Turks and Caicos. Is Rhondalee, I'm sorry, Knowles.
That's okay.
And we're having a great time. Oh my word, what great honor has been bestowed upon her. Her achievements is phenomenal. And I believe what has caused a lot of women to rise to the top over the past generations is the Queen of England too, in that position of headship. It has taught a lot of men that women are capable and is able to do even a better job than the men. And may her soul rest in peace,
Yes.
right? But
Yeah.
as the first female attorney general of the Turks and Caicos Island, what initiatives or reforms did you prioritize during your tenure so far?
Well, we have been quite busy, I have to say. And we have been doing a lot of work over a very wide range of issues. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But I think the one that in line with what you have mentioned just now that I'm very proud of, and that is that when I joined the chambers, I have held every single position that an attorney can hold in this office. And I think what it has done is equip me. One was a sort of stepping stone to the other. It's equipped me all the way up the ladder. And there's a lot of value in that, a lot of value. And so what I realize is that it's really important, especially for Turks and Caicos Islanders, to have a place to land out of law school, to first of all have a way that you can fulfill the requirement for the 3 months training post qualification to get yourself admitted to the bar, and then secondly that you can find a place to work that gives you the opportunity to stretch yourself over a breadth of issues so that you can become a quality lawyer. Because in the end of the day, lawyers, like doctors and so many other types of professions, are only as good as they are able to practice it, right? And so, one of the reforms that I instituted in the chambers is that um, our first tier lawyer post, which is Crown Counsel, that post has been dedicated to Turks and Caicos Islanders, and that's been for many years now. So that persons complain all the time that they come out of law school and they can't get employment in the law firms. They have to become sole practitioners or work with a sole practitioner, which means usually that they don't get the breadth of experience that they need to build quality careers. And so I'm very proud of the fact that we have been able to do that for many attorneys, many Turks and Caicos Islands attorneys, because so an attorney really under 5 years, that person will be able to get in to the chambers and work across, the work that we do for the public service. And then, secondly, getting persons admitted. We have a program which allows Turks and Caicos Islanders to come on board, even if they don't come on into a permanent role here, but they do the training course which we run here, and working with our colleagues in the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, we give them a breadth of experience that allows them, and we also move their applications for admission to our bar. We think that's really important because although persons sometimes think that we have a lot of lawyers, we really don't. I mean, we have a lot of lawyers, but we don't really have a lot of good, a lot of Turks and Caicos Island lawyers. And so we need to continue to encourage that. But more broadly, so that's one that's sort of really close to my heart. And we've been, working that program for some time. And when I see those persons, I feel a sense of pride in those people, especially some of them now have taken up some really senior positions or positions of authority and responsibility. And so we feel a sense of pride that we're doing our part toward the growth and development of the Turks and Caicos. But in more broad terms, we've been at the center of reforms. The most recent set were last October we had a spate of crimes which was unheard of in the Turks and Caicos Islands. It needed to be addressed quickly. It needed to be, you had to have a serious response to it, and the government undertook a very sort of multi-sector, multifaceted approach to those issues, to stamp them out. And so our role was to introduce a series of reforms in the criminal justice system, introduce anti-gang legislation, introduce interception of communication legislation, stiffer penalties for firearms and ammunitions, and especially the high powered weapons, and so we introduced this sort of raft of criminal law reform legislation that had a sort of chilling effect on, as a part of a multifaceted approach, had a chilling effect on the levels of crime. And we've also been, um, very key to the development of reforms in the judiciary, and working very closely with our Chief Justice to deliver during COVID, very sort of unique legislation, virtual, facilitating virtual hearings and virtual applications and so on, that we really needed to have to ensure that there was access to justice, and that persons, notwithstanding the restrictions of COVID and health concerns, serious health concerns, that persons could still access, justice, and including persons who were detained, or persons who were, imprisoned, and so on. And so those are some of the key areas, but there are many, many others that we have been working with government, from one government to another, to introduce. All the legislation that is introduced into the House of Assembly in the Turks and Caicos Islands is drafted by my chambers. And my chambers also deals with mutual legal assistance. I'm responsible for anti-money laundering initiatives in the islands, and I'm responsible for Crown land. That's an area too that the government has just agreed with the UK a set of very important reforms that help to make Crown land more accessible for Turks and Caicos Islanders, especially to improve housing security, because there's an issue with housing security in the islands. And so again, I was at the center of those negotiations and the production of that, and we're still sort of rolling that out. And also the constitutional reform and so on that we are working on. There's so much. There's a lot of reform going on in the Turks and Caicos Islands. It's exciting work. It's exciting not only because it's interesting, but it's exciting because you can see that it is impactful on the lives of Turks and Caicos Islanders. And so so it keeps you ticking. It's exhausting at times, but it certainly keeps you ticking.
How do you balance this great responsibility of Attorney General with your marriage and also being a mother? How do you balance all of that with all the work that you have to do?
Well, let me tell you, some days not very well, but I have my husband, my son. He's 13 now. They both are very supportive. They are very understanding. They are, we work as a team. My family is very important to me, because I recognize that, no matter how hard you work in this part of the world, in the the work that we're doing, for law revision and all of these things, keep the laws. I mean, that's another important thing, where we have the laws accessible as they're made in the cabinet, as they're made in the parliament. They're up online and accessible. That was something that was unheard of for most of my career. And so on. So all these things are very demanding, and they're all very important things. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is your family. And I've got just this one son, and everyone who knows me knows that he's so important to me, because I always say, if I succeed as Attorney General, if I succeed as a public officer, or any of these other positions, but I fail as a mother, then I feel I failed as a human being, because this is such an awesome responsibility. So even while I'm here with you, I'm also helping him with studies, because he has exams, that's end of term exams that start tomorrow. And so, we have a schedule, and I'm sort of keeping him straight on this schedule and so on. I've come into the office to do this interview with you, and he's in the library,
That's cool.
studying, so that I can keep him straight, keep him close. So, and my husband is also here with me, being very supportive. So we stay close together. We stick together.
That's great. That I like that. That's great. I wish him all the best. Well, he'll succeed in all his exams. Um, you also chair. You'd also chair. Was the chairman, right, of the 2019 constitutional,
Yes.
constitution. I'm sorry, review committee. What was that like? Chairing that
That
committee.
was um that was a sort of new challenge. Very interesting work, and it was a privilege as well. And I really thank the then Premier, Charlene Cartwright Robinson, and the then leader of the opposition, Charles Washington Missick, for their confidence in me to chair the Constitution Review Committee. It was a bipartisan committee that had members from both of the two main political parties, and along with our principal legislative drafter. And so we worked together in a really productive way. I mean, we went around the islands and had town hall meetings. We received representations online and through letter writing. And, it was a very engaged review. In the review, the proposals all came from the two political parties, and these were particular proposals they wanted that particular commission to go around and talk to the community about. I always love doing that kind of work, because I think sometimes when you sit in the offices, you lose touch a little bit with what's happening out in the communities. And so I love being in a committee that goes around from island to island to island, because as much as we are small, as you move from the islands, you realize each island is very unique, and each community is very unique in the views and the issues that concern members of the community. They're different, and so you really have to listen. You really have to listen to what the people have to say. And I think also, there's such gratitude. People are so grateful when their government comes to them and asks them, questions. So, that report is a report that forms the basis of the ongoing negotiations that we're having now, which are going really well, and we know that will lead to very fruitful results for the Turks and Caicos Islands. And we still, in this administration, have a premier in the Honorable Charles Washington Missick and a leader of the opposition in the Honorable Edwin Astwood, working together in the way that we had in the past. And that, I think, is the real key to the success of the effort.
In your practice, you have dealt with various areas of law, such as commercial, civil litigation, international compliance, legislative drafting. Which area do you find the most challenging, and why?
Oh, I mean, they have challenges in different ways. Um, I think for me at the moment, I guess the area that is most challenging is civil litigation, because it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of attention, many many hours. And those are things that I don't have a lot of. I don't have a lot of time. Can't pay attention to one thing for too long, and I don't have a lot of hours, because I don't think I have enough hours in the day at the moment. And I think what is challenging to me sometimes about that is we have to work on communication a little bit more, because I find that in terms of I'm inside of government, and so I know from one administration to another that most, if not all, of the proposals that the government puts forward are well-meaning. They see an issue, they want to address this issue, they're earnest in their efforts to address the issue. And but that the way in which it's done isn't always translated to members of the public in that way. Sometimes it's translated in a way where they think government is really trying to erode their rights or to take advantage of them, or haven't heard them. The government hasn't heard their issue. And so sometimes, they litigate only because they're frustrated with their government. And so, when you reach the litigation, generally the parties in litigation are quite passionate about the issues. As lawyers, I mean, I think we're less passionate about the issues. We're passionate about the arguments, but not necessarily about the issues, because we're professionals in dealing with them. But when the issues become so fraught, so emotional, it's hard then to reason it down. And I think in terms of litigation, litigation has to be, to my mind, the sort of last stop. It's so if you've really tried to understand one another, try to, negotiate and come to a resolution, then litigation. I don't think any lawyer would advise their client to rush to litigation. So that's, I think, the most challenging, because I think once we get there, it's very difficult to sort of get people to sort of stand back and see reason. That's what, but they all are challenging in different ways.
Could you discuss any notable cases or projects that you have worked on that have had a significant impact on the legal landscape of the Turks and Caicos Island?
Yes. So we're really proud of the work that we've done for government. And litigation. The good thing about litigation is that it has the effect of clarifying the law, and so at least when you go to court, what you leave with for the most part is something is clarity on the issue, and it helps to govern the way forward. So I've been involved in a number of elections petitions over the years, and there was one set that was quite interesting, because it had to do with dual dual nationality, dual citizenship, and all sorts of very interesting and quirky issues about whether a person could just stand up with their passport held up and say, "I renounce you, I renounce you, I renounce you," as one person said in court, and whether that was effective to renounce citizenship. And as it turns out, it's not, especially if you travel, on that same passport a couple months later. Um, but um, but what that litigation did was it at least clarified the position in law, and it allowed for, a review of whether the islands, the makeup of these islands, where we have a lot of Turks and Caicos Islanders who are born either in the United States or in the Bahamas and so on, Jamaica, whether whether we should have in our constitution a bar, an absolute bar against dual citizenship, especially in circumstances where the persons concerned did not apply for that citizenship. They acquired it by birth. So no action of their own, no choice of their own. It is just by the nature of their birth. And so one of the so as a result of that, we have, for election after election now, candidates know that they should renounce their citizenship, for the other country, in order to stand for election. But also in our constitutional talks, we have with the UK government, we're discussing quite seriously a provision which would allow for persons to retain that other citizenship if they obtained it by birth without any kind of action on their own. And that would perhaps reflect the position that is pretty common in the Turks and Caicos Islands. So that's an example, of one that we thought was quite consequential. And another, I could think of, a matter that had to do with the interpretation of the Crown Land Ordinance. And land issues in the Turks and Caicos Islands are fraught. I mean, there's always some sort of row about land. or tricky issue. And so, we took some matters to court and all the way up to the Privy Council, to clarify, the application of Crown Land Ordinance, and that has also helped to guide decision making moving forward to clarify the law.
What advice would you give to aspiring lawyers who are coming to the end of the show, especially women who are looking to make a mark in this legal profession?
Well, I mean, I was having a conversation with the premier just the other day about lawyers, right? And so just sort of looking at it from the client's perspective. And I think the thing that he said to me that was most important to him in a lawyer was diligence. A client at the end of the day wants their lawyer to be careful in looking at the matter in front of them, because it's very consequential to them, you know, and so I mean, I what I would say is that attorneys, aspiring attorneys, young attorneys, should just work hard, should be willing to put in the effort, should be diligent in their effort for their client, because it's has so much meaning for the client. It could mean the difference between, owning property and not owning property, freedom and not having freedom, feeling that your rights are protected in a society, and that the society is democratic and fair, or versus feeling disillusioned and, you know, um, and relegated. So it's so, and then if you're working for the government, people look at the government as an entity. It is an entity, but the government really is in a sort of fiduciary position for the people. I mean, so any the work that you do for the Turks and Caicos Islands government is really work for the Turks and Caicos Islands people, and so in trust for them. So, this is it's important work. It has meaning. The work has the implications, are very, they're very important. And where there is a contract to build a road, somebody needs access, right? And somebody needs safety on the highway. A community needs to be able to move around and to do commerce and business. Or if it's litigation in relation to, a challenge for immigration purposes or something. I mean, the borders need to be protected. I mean, the country is, we have very porous borders, and so the work is very important. It's very, it has meaning, and whether it is working for the government or whether it is working for an individual client, I think if more lawyers were diligent in the work that they are doing, then success will follow.
What are your future aspirations and goals, both professionally and personally, moving forward?
Well, I mean, it's very interesting. I don't think I could do anything more as an attorney, right? I'd have to pivot, and
Maybe you can run for premier.
oh no, 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 politics will not be the avenue. No, no. When I look down the political road, I see a bright red line that says "Go back the other way." No, I think I mean, you never know. I think perhaps looking toward the bench, perhaps working for some of the these bodies, these regional or international bodies. There's so much. I mean, whatever it is. I mean, I certainly would want to be doing work that I felt was consequential, work that I thought was making a difference or had meaning. I've never in my career done work that, for reasons for other than that, to make money or to gain power or any of that sort of thing. So it would have to be something that I felt I was making a contribution. It had meaning.
Wow. Wow. Well said, well done. I want to congratulate you on all your achievements. Thank you for the great job that you're doing in Turks Island, and I want to thank you for taking time out. Your Honorable Rhondalee Braithwaite Knowles, Attorney General, um, to speak to us on Pathway to Success and to share this wonderful journey of your life. Um,
Thank
in,
you.
clo- in closing, God has given each and every one of us a gift. All you need to do is believe in yourself and pursue the goal that you have, and you'll come out a winner. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Hunter. It's been a
Thank,
pleasure.
thank you for being on our show.